Now that spring practice is over for the University of Alabama, I wanted to talk about what it is we learned and what can we expect moving forward into fall camp. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. So hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe that the Alabama Crimson Tide defense is set to be the best it's been in years? Let me know what you're thinking there. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification because I do constant college football content and you don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoy this content, be sure to like and comment down below because those interactions are really big for content creators such as myself. But with that being said, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. And first off, let's talk about the questions that we may have. And of those questions, I don't think that any of them are necessarily a bad thing, but something that we need to keep in mind. And first and foremost, when we're talking about the offensive line, there are some questions along the offensive line. Now, the good news is for the Alabama Crimson Tide during the spring duration, is they had two guys that are presumptive starters that were not able to go. Now, that might not sound like good news. The only thing good about it is it allows you to develop guys behind them in case you need that depth. And as it looks, the Alabama Crimson Tide is going to need that depth. So with those guys being out and both of them presumptive starters, one of them for sure a starter, it allowed depth behind them to develop. However, it didn't allow the line to gel like you would like it to. Now, what we did find out without a shadow of a doubt, and it's something that I presumed and many others presumed, is that Bryce Young is the guy. Because the offensive line may take a little bit to develop this year, it might not be a completely ready product day one, though I do think this Alabama offensive line is going to be insanely talented. Because of Bryce's mobility, it allows him to get out of the pocket, and the way he is mobile is so incredibly dangerous. His mobility is such that he moves and keeps his eyes downfield. Instead of running to run, he's running to throw. And that right there is going to be really big. Because the Alabama Crimson Tide offensive line might have some growing pains, his ability to escape the pocket and kind of bail them out is going to be really big. The other Alabama Crimson Tide quarterbacks are very talented. Paul Tyson's got a phenomenal arm, but he doesn't have the mobility that Bryce Young has, and that mobility looks to be very big. Now, that's not to say that I don't think the Alabama Crimson Tide offensive line will find their way. I absolutely believe they will, because when you look at the guys that just came in, this Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting class featured incredibly talented offensive line play, and that right there is going to lend itself to success, especially with Doug Marrone, a guy that recruits on the trail are high on, and we need to feel good about that because he's really starting to come into his own, and I'm really interested to see what he does with the offensive line. So though there is a question with the offensive line, we need to kind of temper the expectations, realizing guys were out, realizing how many new faces were there, and this is a unit that's going to be very talented. It just might have some growing pains. Now, also on the offensive side of the ball, we have questions at the wide receiver position. Now, these questions are a little bit different because the wide receiver position looks to be insanely talented at the University of Alabama. At A-Day, we saw freshman Hall showing why he is going to be a star come this fall and come his career at the University of Alabama. This kid is going to be incredibly special. But the thing we need to remember is that not only was John Mechie out, but Ja'Cory Brooks wasn't playing, nor was Christian Leary. Now, I bring those two new names up because Ja'Cory Brooks, per 24/7 Sports, was actually the highest rated Alabama wide receiver in this past class. He was the 5-star guy. He's someone that we're really excited to see, and I can't wait for him to get into fall camp and get some better reps going. But Hall is a guy that probably should have been rated a 5-star. He was a 5-star per Rivals, and he played like a 5-star. He's going to be incredible. Christian Leary's another guy I bring up because the Alabama Crimson Tide right now, the questions I get the most per the receiving corps from you guys is what do we think we're going to do with the slot receiver with Slade Bolden? And I've always answered this. Slade is a great receiver when it comes to zone coverage. The fact that our offensive line is going to have a little bit of growing pains, very talented, but growing pains, Slade is able to find holes in the zone coverage and read zone very well. That's why I think we hear so much about Bill O'Brien being big on Slade Bolden, because I think he understands what Bill O'Brien wants to do with his route modifications, and I think Bill O'Brien might actually turn to Slade Bolden with some of the route modifications that he gave Julian Edelman in that Patriot system. If that's the case, that slot wide receiver position is going to have a heavy use of Slade Bolden. But the Alabama Crimson Tide have also emphasized speed, and that's something Nick Saban has talked about, and Christian Leary has plenty of it. So because of that, that, he will be featured in this offense as well at that wide receiver H position. That wide receiver H, in my estimation, and I want to hear from y'all, let me know down in the comments, I think that's going to be the wide receiver position we see the most rotation out of. I think we'll see guys such as Slade Bolden, Christian Leary, and then summer enrollee JoJo Earl, I think is too good to deny. I think all three of those guys are going to be getting meaningful reps this year at that position, but let me know what y'all are thinking down there, because JoJo Earl, a guy that I've seen, he could come in here and completely change the dynamic of that wide receiver H position. He is that incredibly talented. So the questions we have on offense, though they need to be answered still, I think the reason we feel good is because those questions have incredibly talented answers that we think could come to the forefront. A lot of guys in both of those rooms are very highly touted recruits, guys that the staff are high on, and it's very early into the spring process, and a lot of new faces have to be implemented, so we need to give this time. But as it currently sits, though there are questions, I feel very good about it. The quarterback position, I've always been high on Bryce Young, for those of you that have been around my channel for a long time, though I did make quarterback battle videos, right, talking about the differences in the quarterbacks that Alabama could feature. At the end of them, I was always pretty adamant that I thought Bryce was the long-term future of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and especially once Mac left, Bryce is the guy. He is so insanely talented, and that's not an indictment on any of the other quarterbacks. Bryce has special ability. On the defensive side of the ball, the Alabama Crimson Tide could feature the best defense it has in years. When we look at the pass rush position, a lot of attention goes to Will Anderson, and deservedly so. I made a video on him the second after the Missouri game ended, claiming that he was going to be the best pass rusher in the SEC as a freshman after one game, and he was. But also, his partner in crime, Chris Allen, I think is due for a much bigger year than people expect. These two guys are going to feed off of each other, and it is going to be raining sacks in Tuscaloosa and for anybody that has to go against it. And then when you look at the depth behind them, right, I completely understand why Ben Davis was in the situation he was and transferred, because behind Will Anderson and Chris Allen, you have Chris Broswell, Drew Sanders, and then Dallas Turner coming in over the summer, and I just named the 5-star guys. I didn't even name the 4-star guys who are performing like 5 stars along that defensive pass rush, because there are a few. The interior is also incredibly exciting. Getting LeBron Ray back, this is going to be a group that is very deep in its rotation, and 5-star Damon Payne comes in over the summer, and I think he's a guy that's going to be too good to deny. He will be involved in this rotation. To what capacity, I'm not sure, because you have guys such as Tim Smith, DJ Dale. You have so many talented guys along this Alabama defensive front. It's really a guessing game as to which guy could be the guy that goes off in traditional Alabama defensive tackle fashion. Who do you guys think it will be? Because that question is seemingly endless. So the Alabama defensive front is incredibly talented. And when we looked at the middle linebacker position, I think a lot of us had some questions as to who would replace Dylan Moses. And then when the spring game happened, my goodness me, Jalen Moody, phenomenal. But also Lawson was incredibly impressive. The Alabama Crimson Tide middle linebacker position is in safe hands. Kendrick Blackshire coming in over the summer, he was a guy who should have been rated much higher than he was, but he had a lot of injuries in high school. He will benefit from the Crimson Tide strength and conditioning staff that they just brought in. Those guys are absolute wizards. You listen to trainers, and if you listen to Quarterback Spotlight talk about those guys, they are incredible. So the Crimson Tide has help on the way on the inside linebacker position, which already had a ton answered during spring. And actually, that was probably the best answer the Alabama Crimson Tide fans got during the spring. But the defensive back position is also incredibly loaded. Even though Alabama just experienced a transfer, JaQuincy McKinstry looked like the future at cornerback. His poise was unbelievable. He was able to track down fast receivers, stay on top of them, and had a really good understanding of what he was able to do, and that's only going to continue. And if he works this summer and goes into fall camp with the same trajectory he ended spring at, he is going to be very hard to deny. But we also have to remember Kyrie Jackson is coming in over the summer, and he possesses elite length with, I believe, 6'4". Just unbelievable length at the corner position, unbelievable upside. This Alabama cornerback room is incredible, and we haven't even talked about Terrion Arnold coming in, 5-star defensive back who can play corner, who can play safety. I think he's interested at cornerback at the Alabama Crimson Tide, but if they need him at the safety position, he could be a guy to watch for at safety, because there is a position battle with Wright and Helms, although Helms was absolutely out there laying the smackdown on A-Day. I think that he's looking to retain that position. The Alabama Crimson Tide may have questions, but the defensive side of the ball has a ton of answers and unbelievable amounts of talent, even in positions that I think we may have been a little bit worried about. The Crimson Tide defense is as deep as I can remember it is. And on the offensive side of the ball, the questions might be as simple to answer as the guys just need more time, and some of the people that would have answered some of those questions weren't there. Some of the presumptive starters along the offensive line, some of the presumptive starters along the wide receiver room, and then freshman wide receivers who were highly rated, not there. You got to remember, Alabama signed 4 of the top 10 wide receivers in the nation coming out of high school. 3 of the top 10 of those guys did not play in A-Day. Only 1 did, and that's what we saw. This Alabama wide receiving room has the potential to be huge. We just need to give it time to come together, but we ultimately learned that this Alabama Crimson Tide team has got phenomenal upside and that Bryce Young could be incredibly special. You pair him with that incredibly talented tight end room, that wide receiver room, and an offensive line that may be a project, but his mobility allows him to get out in space with incredibly talented running backs and a great defense. This could be a special year for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Let me know what you're thinking down in the comments. What'd you think about the inside linebacker position? Who are you excited to come in over the summer? And do you believe that this could be the best Alabama Crimson Tide defense in years? That's it. See ya.